So this meeting today will be recorded for those of us who aren't able to join in. And as I said, please make sure that you are muted when you come into the space. While we're waiting to start the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve Sea Star Survey and Orientation and Recruitment for this morning, I wanted to just in the chat invite you to share a little bit about yourself so we can have more of a shared experience. So where are you joining us from today, and what might be your favorite tide pool organism? Feel free to type those into the chat. And I should say my name is Kristen Bands, and I am the Marine Program Coordinator for the Friends of Cape Falcon, which is now the Marine Program of North Coast Land Conservancy. And I'll go into that a little bit later. Awesome, nudibranchs. Nudibranchs are great, Morgan.
I don't know how to do this shit.
Good morning. So while you are joining us today, please ensure that your microphone is muted, and I will do my best to ensure that folks are muted as they come into the space. My name is Kristen Bands. I'm the Marine Program Coordinator for North Coast Land Conservancy. And we just have a couple of questions on the screen to get us oriented to the space. If you feel like you want to share, just go ahead and tell us where you're coming from today and maybe your favorite tide pool organism. And we'll start probably at about 2 to 3 after the hour. So I'm seeing Devin from Portland is really into crabs. We also have some more folks from Portland. Riley likes crabs as well. Mussels and crabs. All the Portland folks are liking the mussels and crabs this morning. Sea urchins. Awesome. Sunflower stars. Yes. I'm so excited. There's people from all over that are joining us today. Thank you so much. All right. Nudibranchs. Yes, nudibranchs are awesome. We saw some Dorids and nudibranchs last year when we were doing our tide pool ambassador program at Short Sand Beach. Nudibranchs, yes. All right. Changed your answer. Sea anemones, awesome. Okay, everyone. Thanks so much for playing along with that this morning. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So my name is, again, Kristen Bands, and I am the Marine Program Coordinator for North Coast Land Conservancy, which is an organization that works mostly in the land trust arena, and we just adopted a marine program, and I'll tell you more about that in a little bit. But we are here today to talk about our Sea Star surveys and the protocol that we're going to do with our partner organization, Marine. And we have a special guest today, Melissa Miner, and she will introduce herself a little bit later. But for the next hour, we're going to have kind of 3 different chunks of how this time is divided up. We're going to talk about Oregon Marine Reserves and the North Coast Land Conservancy Marine Program. And then we'll talk in the middle of the presentation about Sea Star wasting and the marine protocol. And then I'll close out the presentation with information about how you can volunteer to work with this protocol at the site, so in the Marine Reserve, and those expectations that are part of that process. And we'll wrap up with any questions that you might have. So if you do have questions, feel free to save those until the end of our conversation, because we're only with each other for an hour, and I wanted to make sure that we're all able to move as quickly as possible through the first part of the presentation so we can get to the meat. Okay. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. So the image on the screen is an aerial view of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, looking at Cape Falcon, which is the large landmass protruding out into the water. Short Sand Beach, which is right at the top of your screen, and Oswald West State Park in nearby Neocani Mountain. These are the main landmarks that decide the boundaries of the reserve on the land side. The reserve is located between Arch Cape and Manzanita, and it extends 3 nautical miles out into Oregon's territorial sea. And the whole entire reserve is 20 square miles, and it is managed by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. The Friends of Cape Falcon Marine Reserve was an organization that was made a constellation of various nonprofits, and that organization was responsible for the advocacy, education, and outreach of the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve on behalf of the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. And in February, that group was adopted by the North Coast Land Conservancy, and the group became a program of North Coast Land Conservancy. Now, the advocacy, outreach, and education that we provided as that group, we still do all of those same things, just under a new banner and in service still of the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve. And on the screen, you can see a variety of logos, and these are organizations that are involved in the marine program itself. So Oregon has 5 different marine reserves. Cape Falcon is the northernlymost reserve, and it is the youngest as well. It was established in 2016. So we're the northernlymost and youngest. We are of moderate size compared to the other marine reserves. And in total, the Oregon Marine Reserve System takes around 9% of Oregon's state waters. And the planning and designation of these reserves were over a decade in the making, with state and local entities, government agencies were involved, as well as coastal communities, ocean users, and other stakeholders helped determine and place these sites up and down the coast. The Marine Reserve System is a first for the state of Oregon. It's the first long-term nearshore conservation and monitoring program, and it's also the first program focused on the economic, social, and cultural dynamics of Oregon coast communities. The Oregon Marine Reserve System, under kind of those large ideas, has 3 goals. All marine reserves across and marine reserve protected areas across the world have various different goals. And the ones for Oregon state waters are the conservation of habitat and biodiversity, scientific research and evaluation, and avoiding significant economic impact to coastal users. Now, if you want to find out more details about each of the reserves or more information about Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, you can visit OregonMarineReserves.com. So each marine reserve, they're all different. They have different flavors, they're different shapes and sizes. They have various different biodiversity, different habitat, and different types of human interactions. But all of them share 2 different designations. So one is a marine reserve designation and one is a marine protected area designation. The marine reserve proper at Cape Falcon is right in the middle between Arch Cape and Manzanita. So that first image that I showed you with Short Sands Beach, the protruding Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, and you saw Neocani in the background, all of that was the very middle section of the Marine Reserve, and that's where our most protected space is. So the Marine Reserve designation means there's absolutely no take of any animals or seaweeds within that space, and that's the large red rectangle on the screen. Each marine reserve also has a marine protected area that is abutting it or bookending it in some way. We have 2 at Cape Falcon. One is a shoreside marine protected area that's located near Falcon Cove Beach. And there is some take allowed in these marine protected areas. So you can fish from the shore, you can angle from shore near Falcon Cove Beach. And in the West MPA, which is further out into the territorial sea, you can take salmon by troll, and you can also do crabbing. I mentioned that the Oregon Marine Reserve System was managed by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, and that the marine program assists the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife through spreading their research, educating about stewardship and ocean processes as well. And so I like to call these things toolkits. And these toolkits are ways in which I'm able to do my job for working on behalf of the Marine Reserve. So the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife and various different research partners have scientific toolkits in which they use to help gather data both within the reserve and external to the reserve to track changes in the nearshore environment over the long term. And the ones that are performed at the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve are hook and line surveys, and those are catch and release. So we have vessels that go out and we catch various different rockfish and cabezon and other fish that we have within the reserve, and the length of these fish are measured. These are fish that grow extremely slowly and mature quite late in life as well. And so it's important to be able to know, are the protections working for these fish? Are they actually able to have a long lifespan? Are they able to sustain these life patterns with protections in place? And we're looking at these fish within and without the reserve as well. So we have sites near Cape Meares that we at Cape Falcon are using as a comparison site for our research. We also have oceanographic mooring that happens, and this looks at temperature and salinity and oxygen, and also looks at ocean currents. We do scuba and video lander surveys. These are underwater surveys where we're counting organism communities and looking at the types of habitat that are under the water. We're also counting the individual number of species or the abundance that is happening within these communities as well. And above the surface, we are doing ocean acidification monitoring. So we have devices at Short Sand Beach, Oswald West State Park, where we are monitoring the pH in the subtidal zone. So that gives us information about how organisms, invertebrate organism communities are handling or being able to react, or how they're changing over time due to the level of ocean acidification that's happening within this aspect of the reserve. Another toolkit that we have is our stewardship, outreach, and community science toolkits, and you're part of that toolkit today. We're going to be talking about that in just one moment. So we have action days, and we partner with Surfrider and state parks and Trail Keepers of Oregon, where we're maintaining the beaches and the trails that are part of Oswald West State Park. We participate in a King Tides event that brings attention to sea level rise and functional issues for coastal communities. We also have speaker series and workshops that we do year round that share the science of the marine reserves. And we have interpretation as well as more community science programs that we use in these toolkits. So seabird monitoring, for instance, we do this in the spring and summer with Portland Audubon, where we're looking at population dynamics and nesting behavior. The sea star monitoring, which is what we're talking about today. So I won't go over that right now, but we're talking about that today. We have BioBlitz that we partner with the Oregon Coast Aquarium and other marine reserves, which we use the iNaturalist application, and we go out and we look at all the different types of organisms within the reserve on a given day or a time set, and we're recording as much life as we possibly can within that time span. And we also have tide pool ambassadors, which happen at Oswald West State Park at Short Sands, and we're teaching tide pool etiquette and helping people understand the organisms that live within these intertidal environments. Now, why we're all here today is to talk about the sea star surveys, and we are I'm so happy to have Melissa Miner with us today to share with you more about the partnership that we're entering into and the protocol for these surveys. Melissa has over 25 years of experience, and she's played a key role in the collection and synthesis of long-term monitoring data, which is what we'll be doing at the reserve, from rocky intertidal communities from Alaska to Mexico, as part of the multi-agency Rocky Intertidal Network, or MARINE, who is our partner in this project. She's currently a researcher for UC Santa Cruz and works remotely from Bellingham, where she lives with her family and Rescue Mutt, who've all assisted with sea star surveys. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Melissa's going to start sharing hers, and she's going to take it away.
Sorry, I'm just finding the right thing to share. Okay, can you guys see that? The presentation?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Thanks for that introduction, Kristen. So as Kristen said, I'm going to share some information about sea star wasting disease and population monitoring on the Oregon coast. And Kristen, you gave a nice introduction to some of my background. I work with the Marine program, which is a long-term rocky intertidal network of a bunch of different organizations who are all doing rocky intertidal monitoring using the same methods all up and down the coast from Alaska to Mexico. And so we monitor a bunch of different things, not just sea stars. We kind of target the key players in the rocky intertidal system. So things like mussels and rockweeds and barnacles and lots of those species that either form those distinct zones in the rocky intertidal and form important habitats for other things, or things like sea stars that are what we call keystone species because of their really important function in the rocky intertidal community. And one of the main reasons that we collect these data is for assessing impacts from things like oil spills and climate change and what I'm going to focus on today, marine disease events. So in Oregon, we have 5 long-term monitoring sites that we monitor a bunch of different species at. Most of these were established in 2000, so we're going on 22 years now of monitoring data at these sites in Oregon. And I don't have time to show information or trends for species other than a quick example from sea stars today. But if you're interested in learning more about the Marine program, you can check out our website here. So one of the things we did around 2014, 2015 is we started partnering with community science groups like yourselves to expand our monitoring into new areas to better capture sea star populations. And that's because we started to see sick stars with symptoms of what we call sea star wasting disease. And it was particularly important to expand these surveys into the marine reserves that Kristen talked about. And so we've got 3 sites that I've listed here. There are a couple others that we don't have quite as long-term data for. And then it sounds like you all will be setting up a new site at Short Sand Beach in the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, which is great. So I'll give a little overview of what sea star wasting is. It's really a general description for a set of symptoms that have been seen in many species of sea stars. And I want to emphasize that the cause is unknown. We know that there's at least 20 species of sea stars that are affected. And it's had a really interesting pattern of spread and emergence that was patchy and not linear in the way that you'd kind of expect from a typical disease event. So we first saw this disease emerge on the outer coast of Washington in late spring of 2013. And then subsequently saw it in some places within the Salish Sea, Puget Sound region, but not everywhere. One of the next spots we observed it was down in California, and the Oregon coast actually wasn't impacted until pretty much a full year later. So it's been really interesting and kind of perplexing that way. But it really has been seen now coast-wide, so all the way from Mexico to Alaska. We've had pretty massive loss of most sea star species due to this disease. There is some thought that there's a link to temperature, particularly temperature anomalies. So for example, having warmer temperatures in winter months, we've seen some areas where this is associated with emergence of the disease, but this pattern isn't present on a coastwide scale. So again, it's another one of these pieces that seems important, but we're not quite sure how it fits in yet. There are some brave people who are trying to figure out what the cause of the disease actually is. I'm not one of those people, I'm an ecologist. But the current focus is on the microbiome. So that's the viruses and bacteria that are associated with sick sea stars. And they're also looking at how other factors, so things like water and air temperature, ocean chemistry, oxygen levels, how those might contribute to the development of the disease in individuals. So the working hypothesis is that there might be a pathogen that's perhaps present everywhere now, but it takes one or more of these other factors to kind of stress the stars and kind of push them past the limit of where they can defend themselves against this pathogen. So again, that's a hypothesis. We really don't know what the cause of the disease is at this point, but hopefully, some of this research that's going on we'll learn more soon. And then the last point I want to make is that this has been a really long-term disease event. So it's been around since 2013, and most of the mortality occurred in those early years, so 2013, 14, 15. But even now, when you go out to a site on the Oregon coast, for example, most of the sea stars appear healthy, but you can almost always find a few individuals that have signs of disease. So, and I'll show you what that looks like here. So early signs of sea star wasting include stars being kind of lethargic. They can curl up their arms and just look kind of uncomfortable. This is often followed by development of lesions and tissue decay. And then sometimes stars will drop their arms, and we think this might be a way of trying to rid themselves of the disease. But if this isn't successful, then you get individuals that have lesions pretty much all over their body. They can drop several arms, and eventually this can lead to death. Just because an animal gets affected by disease doesn't mean that it's doomed to die. So we do see evidence of animals that have had lesions, and those lesions have healed. We also see quite a few kind of odd looking stars now that have dropped those arms. Again, we think in an attempt to rid themselves of the disease. And sea stars are really good at regenerating body parts. And so they'll drop an arm and then they'll grow a new arm back in that spot. And sometimes they grow extra arms. So we see strange looking sea stars now that have 6, 7, 8 arms where they typically would only have 5. So Kristen is going to talk more about actual sampling methods, I think a little bit later, but just a quick overview of what we do at each of those marine long-term monitoring sites, and then also in association with our community science partners. What we're really trying to do with these sea star monitoring surveys is sample the same area at a site over time. And the way we do this within the marine network is we actually install bolts in the rock. So we drill holes and epoxy those bolts in. And if you've spent time on the Oregon coast, you may have seen some of our bolts out there. And we use these to stretch a meter tape around to delineate the boundary of a sea star plot. And we typically have 3 of these at a site. For some of the community science partners, because they don't have access to the same sort of equipment we have for drilling into rocks, often those groups will choose kind of a distinctive feature at a site. So maybe a rock or a group of rocks that are easy to sample that same area over time, or time searches are done as well to try and standardize that monitoring effort. So within these plots or those time search areas, we count and measure every sea star that we encounter. And most of those are this species, Pysester ochraceus, the ochre star. And to size these, we record what we call the radius of the star. So the distance from the center of the star to the tip of an arm. We like to try and get the longest arm, but oftentimes you just get the arm that you can access, because these are often kind of shoved down deep into crevices. So this information, these data that we collect, give us a couple different important sets of information about the sea star population. So the first is just the number within that population. And I'm showing an example from Bob Creek, which is one of our sites just south of Newport. So this is counts on the y-axis, and these are years across the bottom here. And this is just showing you how those numbers within our 3 plots at that site have changed over time. And you can see there's this slight decline. I mean, it's maybe not slight. This is, this represents a couple hundred animals. So a decline associated with sea star wasting, but this site actually recovered quite nicely in the years following that dip in numbers. And you can see that it actually now has more ochre stars than it did prior to the disease event. So that's great news, and that's something that we're seeing at most, not all of the Oregon sites, but the Oregon coast in general is doing pretty well in terms of ochre star recovery. But the other piece of the story is those sizes. So that gives us information about the population size structure. And so if we look at that, these are the years lined up with these this trend line here at the top. And we didn't start recording sizes until 2004. And so these are years across the bottom. And then each of these bubbles represents the number of stars that were found in a given size class. And so just a little schematic here. These are sizes in millimeters. It goes from 0 to 200. But just know that these ones at the bottom of the graph are the smallest, very tiny juvenile stars. And then these ones with the top, represented by the top bubbles, are the bigger adult stars. So what we see is this is what kind of the normal size distribution looked like prior to disease. And then when the disease event hit, we lost stars across all size classes. And then in those years following the disease, we had pretty major recruitment events. So sea stars have their babies float around in the water column. And then when they're ready to settle out, they settle onto a rock and then turn into what we recognize as a sea star, but teeny tiny sea star. And so we see that there were lots and lots of these guys recruiting. It looks like there's good survivorship at this site. And so we're seeing them, these size classes kind of move up into the larger size classes, but they're not quite yet where they were before. So we're missing some of those larger adult ochre stars. And that's important because those kind of serve a different function in the environment than the smaller stars. They eat more, they eat some different things. And so, so again, the Oregon coast in general is looking pretty good, but we still have a ways to go before we're back to that pre-sea star wasting, those conditions in the population. So again, Kristen's going to talk more about those kind of intensive quantitative surveys, if that's something that you're interested in participating in. It does take kind of a special kind of person to want to spend a couple hours crawling around in the cold, slimy intertidal zone. So if that, if after learning more, you decide, I'm not sure that I want to sign up for that, we do have another way that you can contribute, which is also really useful. And that is through our sea star sea star observation log. So not just for stars that are sick, but stars that are healthy as well. And this is a fun way to contribute, because you can go to anywhere along the coast. With those quantitative surveys, you're going to the same spot every single time and really intensively sampling a small area of that site. With these, you can go anywhere you want. If you've got, you know, a favorite place that you go to once a week, you can send in an observation for that, that location every single time you go. These are pretty easy to fill out, especially after the first time. So we ask that you provide the date that you were at a site, the site location name, and then one of the things that is sometimes a hurdle for people is providing us with GPS coordinates, so the latitude and longitude measurements for an area. And those are actually really easy to get off of Google Maps, and we have instructions for that on our website here, seastarwasting.org. We also ask that people identify species using their Latin names, not their common names. And this is because oftentimes a single species can have multiple common names, which can get confusing. But we do have really nice identification cards that help you, or identification information on the website that help you to identify not just species of adult stars, but also juveniles, which can sometimes look different. And for some of these species, like the ogre star and the mottled star, which can look similar, we've got tips for telling them apart. And then we also have good pictures of examples of symptoms of wasting disease. And you can always take a picture if you're not sure about a sea star species or whether or not it's sick or healthy. You can take a picture and send that to us. And if you submit one of these observations, so each of these bubbles represents a place on the Oregon coast where someone or multiple people have submitted observations. And I know this font is really tiny, but this is an example from Yachats Beach. And you can see when the last observation was submitted, when the disease was first observed, which species were observed there, and who the observers were. And if you click on this little link here, which is the site observation history, you can see all the records that were submitted for an area. And so you become just a tiny bit famous if you submit an observation. Your name will go on our Sea Star tracking map. The last thing that I want to mention, and this is a really great way to use those observation logs, is there is a lot of interest in this species, the sunflower star Pycnopodia helianthoides. And I saw that a number of you listed this as your favorite tidal organism. And there's good reason for that. These are really cool stars. So these are one of the kind of key, they're called keystone predators in the system. They eat anything that they can get near. So they have a pretty major impact on their surrounding environment. But these guys were particularly hard hit by sea star wasting. So it was estimated that more than 97% of the total population of sunflower stars ranging from Alaska to Mexico died due to sea star wasting. And this was particularly severe in the southern part of their range, so from Oregon to Mexico. So it's actually really rare that we see these guys now from Oregon south. So if you see these, we'd love to hear about it. They are so rare that a group of researchers spearheaded actually by some folks at Oregon State University, put together all the information that we have on sunflower stars, and they were successful in getting it listed as critically endangered on the IUCN Red List, which is a global list of endangered species. And right now, the process is underway to get these listed as endangered on the US endangered species list. So again, would be really great to hear about it if you see these guys. So that's all I have. I didn't have a ton of time. So hopefully that quick overview helps to inspire some of you to help out with those sea star surveys at Cape Falcon, or submit some of those observations. And Kristen, I'm not sure if you want me to stick around for questions or if there's time for quick questions now. Okay.
so you don't have to stay for the rest of the presentation. Why don't we go ahead and take some questions now specifically for you. So if anyone has a question, please either type it into the chat or you can unmute yourself. And if there are no questions, then we can just move on to the rest of the presentation. But before we do move on, I wanted to mention to everyone, we also have one of our partner organizations on the call. Jesse Jones is the volunteer coordinator for Coast Watch, a program of Oregon Shores Conservation Coalition, and they are training folks to be able to do the observational surveys that Melissa was just taking you through. So if you are interested in doing the less rigorous observational surveys, Jesse, if you want to unmute here in a second, I have some questions coming in, but we can also talk about that here in a minute. But I do see some questions coming in. First question is, let's see here. Are there specific times and seasons you need more volunteers? So Ethan, I'm gonna go over for the long-term data set that we're gonna be collecting. It's for summertime, but the observational can happen at any time of the year. And do small sunflower stars appear like the larger adults so as not to mistake them for another species? Melissa, I think that one's for you.
Yeah, so they're pretty distinct as juveniles. They don't look exactly like the adults. Sunflower stars, when they're really tiny, they're interesting because they actually, when they settle out, they only have 5 arms, and then they start to grow those additional arms. So they kind of look lopsided when they're really tiny. They've got some longer arms on one side, and then they've got smaller arms that are kind of growing out from the opposite side. But they do become pretty distinctive early on. There are a couple other things that you might confuse them with when they're really tiny. But we do have some pictures on our website. And again, if you ever see something that you're not sure what it is, if you can get a good picture of it and send it to us, we can usually help ID from photos. And kind of encouragingly, it sounds like someone in Northern California actually saw a number of juvenile Pycnopodia. He didn't get a picture of them, but from the description, it sounds like that might have been the case. That's what he saw. So definitely keep an eye out for those guys. We'd love to hear about successful recruitment of Pycnopodia.
Are there any more questions for Melissa before she says goodbye? No questions, but thank you, Melissa, for sharing this information. I think there's one more. Yes, you said that in the populations that have regained their numbers after exposure to sea star wasting are significantly smaller and haven't filled in size. Is this due to age and size differences based on maturity or changes in overall population size?
Yeah, so again, the way that the ochre stars, the way that those populations recover is you get recruitment of baby stars basically into that area. And so they have a larval stage that floats around in the water column, and they can be in the water for several weeks before they settle out. But then as soon as they move, they look very different when they're floating around as larvae from the sea stars that we recognize on the coast. But as soon as they settle out, they look like little teeny tiny stars that you'd need a scope to see. And then they grow up to a size that you can see with the naked eye, within several months maybe. But it takes them a long time, several years, to get to those bigger adult sizes. So it's really just the size structure data helps us to know what the population is made up of in terms of whether it's mostly juveniles or adults or some mixture. And what a healthy population has is a mixture of juveniles and adults.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Melissa, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. And Jesse, I know you're on the call. Did you want to unmute really quick and tell folks about the upcoming training opportunity for the observational data set collection?
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, Melissa. It's great to see you. Yes, so Melissa has been partnering with us for a few years now. I think we started in 2020. She gave our first Zoom for Coast Watch, and just for those that are out on the beach a lot and can't necessarily, like, they don't either live near one of these long-term monitoring sites. The Sea Star observation surveys are great because you can do them all year long, and you can do them anywhere. And so this is a great opportunity to be involved as often as you want to. And on the 25th, I think, in the evening sometime, Melissa is going to talk a little bit more about this and how to identify types of sea stars that you might see. So along the Oregon coast, depending on where you are, depending how far out into the intertidal tidal or subtidal you are, there are a few different types that you might not recognize that they would love to know that you see as well. So I look forward to seeing you then, Melissa, and hearing more about that. Thank you.
Yeah, and Jesse also put the information for that opportunity in the chat. So if you're interested, the link is there for you as well. Okay, so I'm going to round out our time today with just a little bit more information about what it's going to look like if you would like to volunteer for the long-term data set collection. And so what that means is that was the first type of data collection that Melissa was talking about. Here with the Cape Falcon Marine Reserve, we have a location set up at Short Sands Beach, Oswald West State Park. And this is the area where we normally do most of our Tide Pool Ambassador program. So that etiquette program that I was talking about earlier and stewardship program. I am looking to recruit at least 10 volunteers to help me with 4 different dates, and I'll share those dates with you here in a minute. I'm looking for at least 10 volunteers because we're going to be working in pairs. So you can see in this image, the work is very detail oriented, and it's the type of work that requires you to get down and dirty with nature a little bit. You're going to get wet, you're going to slip on rocks probably, you're going to get a little bit messy, and you're probably going to be cold if you want to volunteer for this type of activity. So the activity is something that occurs 4 times, and it's going to be during the summer months. And that's because when we have the lowest low tides generally happen during the summer months. And we need that exposure in order to be able to see more accurately the stars that are in the intertidal area within our observation site. So the shifts are about 3 hours in length, and they occur 1 hour before and 1 hour minus tide events. The work again is detailed. You're going to be on uneven ground. The program is focusing on finding, measuring, and documenting sea stars' size and physical state. And we'll be utilizing the, if you do sign up to volunteer, you will get a handbook, and we will go over on our first time out together how to accurately monitor the size and physical state of the stars based on the marine protocol and those image cards that Melissa was showing you earlier from her slide presentation. So we'll be accurately identifying the physical state. You'll be working in pairs. So you can see in this image, you have one person on the ground with a flashlight, and she's looking underneath a rock within a certain area on that rock. So she has a measuring device that allows her to stay within a scope of the area on that rock. And she's counting all of the stars within a very specific area. The area size that we're going to be measuring in is within 5 meters. So we'll do 5-meter increments across a surface. In our case, it will also be 3 rocky outcroppings at Short Sand Beach. So you'll have one person who is on the site who is counting the stars, and they're calling out the star that they're seeing. So for instance, it's an ochre star, and you'd call it out by its name, its scientific name, and then you would say how many that you see, and then you would describe to the person who is standing up taking the information down on a clipboard, what the state of that star is. So you're working in pairs, and we can switch off which pair is doing what, but we're working in pairs in 5-meter increments down a site, and it's the same site every single time. So the work is done looking under rocks and ledges, and the work happens about 20 to 30-minute walk out to the beach site, and I'll show you that here. So it's this next slide, excuse me. So the expectations for the program, we have 4 surveys across the summertime. So 1 every month, May, June, July, and August. And my ask is that you participate in at least 3 of the 4, and that includes the first survey. During the first survey, it will be our training on-site survey, and we'll show you exactly how to do the protocol at that time. We want to make sure that you stay for the entire survey shift because you'll be working in pairs, as I mentioned earlier. You will have a handbook and materials that are part of that, so you can familiarize yourself at home or wherever you are with what a diseased star looks like, how to identify different types of stars, and in which state these stars are. So if they're juvenile or adult or adolescent. And we also, we also ask that you accurately record the data. So this person here is measuring the arm of the star, and they're going to be calling that information out to the person recording. And so that relationship between the person who is measuring and observing and the recorder needs to be something that's pretty solid, and you're checking in with each other regularly, so you're accurately recording that data. And all of that data is going to be handed to myself, and then I will report that data to Marine, and we will have our own site and log observation. I'm losing my words here, excuse me. We'll have our own log observation data set that is on the Marine site, and we can observe that over time, just like the data sets that Melissa was showing you earlier. So we will have one of those for Short Sand Beach. So here are the dates and times, and please note that this is really early in the morning. And the reason why it's early in the morning is because that's when the minus tide events are happening. So we have our dates are in May, June, July, and August. Most of them are going to be on a Friday. We have one on a Saturday. And the reason why they're on a Friday is because we don't want to overlap too much with our Tide Pool Ambassador program. So Short Sand Beach is one of the busiest beaches in all of the Oregon State Parks. And we want to ensure that we are out there and doing our thing before all of the crowds get there and settle in for the day. When we're out there and we're participating in the survey, we're also representing how to have good tide pool stewardship and how to treat these animals and how to be in this space. So it's not just a volunteership where you're counting these stars and documenting disease or lack thereof, but you're also an ambassador and showing people who are at the beach how to recreate safely and responsibly and in respect to the nature that is around them. So I'm going to go back real quick. Yeah, we have the 4 dates. We're going to meet in the Short Sand Beach parking lot at the designated time, and then we'll be out there for several hours monitoring stars. So if you are interested in getting up early and being out there with me on these 4 dates, I encourage you to either contact me after this program. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all of your lovely faces. So you can contact me directly. I'll have my information in the chat. But I also wanted to share with you that we have a website that you can sign up directly with. Actually need to share my screen again really quickly. There's a website that you can, so there's my contact information. And the website that you would need to go to sign up to be a volunteer is at, yes, I'll go back to the dates, North Coast Land Conservancy. So it's nclctrust.org, and it's in the chat, and you can sign up under the volunteer tab there. Let me go back so you can see those dates. So I'll give you a moment to write those down if you're interested. And if there's any questions, I'm happy to take those now. You can either unmute yourself or you can type those in the chat. Okay, if there are no questions, I'm just curious. Has this inspired anyone to want to volunteer for sea star wasting, or at least piqued your interest a little bit more about finding out more about sea star wasting? Yeah, great. And I really hope that some of you do join us out on the beach, either in the observational survey, which again, you can do anytime. And we have a wonderful partner through Coast Watch who is going to be providing that as a service. Or you can join me those really early mornings, 4 days during the summertime to do those long-term data sets and get down and dirty on the beach and really kind of find those stars and see what's up. So again, my information, I'll put that back up if you're interested. I'll just put it in the chat. It's easier. You can contact me directly. You will be, oh, that's a good question. You will be paired up on beach day. So if you want to volunteer with someone, that's awesome. Just tell me that that's what you want to do, and we can make sure that you're paired up together. Oops, I typed that wrong. My contact information is in the chat. And again, in order to sign up to volunteer through North Coast Land Conservancy, please go to the website, which is in the chat. It's northcoastlandconservancytrust.org or nclctrust.org, and go to the volunteer tab, and then you can just sign up to volunteer right there, or you can email me directly and I can get you connected that way too. Either way, our time this morning has come to an end, and I'm so glad that all of you joined us. And I'll ask one more time, are there any questions? Okay, great. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you out on the beach. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.